This is Tech Society, and this is a mailbag episode. All right, let's get to the questions.
Well, someone just has an idea, an app idea.
Okay.
And they come to us, you, me, and they want to see it made. What do?
Well, I guess a lot of people come to us and they haven't actually thought their idea out fully, right? So no business model, no kind of, I wouldn't say functional spec, because I don't anticipate the average person would do a functional spec, but I do kind of expect them to flesh their idea out. Our first advice is always get people to do wireframes, just themselves, like whiteboard wireframes. Right?
I think a gap that people have is that people use apps, but they don't create apps.
Yeah.
So you actually have this strange gap between expectations. So basically what happens is you use Facebook. Well, you don't. I'm sure other people do. And behind Facebook is a huge amount of things happening, right? You've got recommendation engines, you've got...
But if you were just going to go to a software developer, let's say he was a student at a hub randomly, and you had this idea for an app, which was like Facebook, and you went to this random Harvard student and you said, I've got this idea. How would you describe it to him so he knew what to build?
It has to be visual.
Visual, right?
Yeah, which is why you said wireframes. So to anyone who doesn't know, wireframes is basically a representation of the app written in pen.
And you can even go
draw
further
boxes
than that.
And stuff.
There's a really good website, really good service called Figma. So like the average person can jump on Figma, use their templates, pretty much knock out a fairly thorough design, like a mock-up that we could easily actually understand the idea just by looking at it.
Ultimately,
that's what most people should do, but most people don't do that.
Yeah.
Right?
So
most people go to a developer and they go, oh, here's my idea, and it's poorly thought out, and then they pay the developer lots of money, and then what they get back is not their idea.
Well, even before coming to us, what should happen is they create the wireframes and then on a piece of paper, and they market test it by giving someone a piece of paper, getting them to press the buttons on the piece of paper, and just seeing how it flows. And it's so much cheaper.
Would you pay for this?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Usually the answer is no, which means you go back to the drawing board and discover a new cool idea.
You find a problem to solve.
Yeah, so often they have this kind of solution. They think people would want it.
Yeah, a solution looking for a problem.
Yeah, and it's more common than you think. I think you should look for red flags and green flags, and maybe we can go through each of those.
I like that,
Yeah.
So,
Non-technical founders?
So you mean like when a company's hiring developers?
No. If you come to a business and they're the owners of the business or the leadership is not programmers, are not programmers,
or at least weren't programmers at some point.
Then you kind of have this kind of culture gap between the workers and the leadership. It's important to be able to speak to whoever you're speaking to, and they understand what's going on in the operations floor, right, in the factory floor.
Red flag for me is they build websites. They're a web developer. And the solution they're proposing to you is in WordPress. That to me is a red flag.
Why is that a problem? Now we know why that's a problem.
They're not software engineers, and they're not actually software developers, they are web developers. And there is definitely a difference. It's much like asking a bricklayer to build your entire house. He can lay a pretty sweet driveway, but can he build an entire house?
So my analogy for that is usually the difference between a piping engineer and a plumber, right? As an ex-piping engineer, I know this, but ultimately what happens is when you have a plumber, he puts together, he gets equipment to the laydown yard, and he puts together, plumbs up your toilets, plumbs everything up. But the actual material, how it's put together, the layout of the lands, and how it actually works, the angles and all that, it's all worked out by the engineer, right? So there's an extra layer of understanding that needs to be had before you can start engineering, and that's the difference between engineering and web development.
I want to make it clear I'm not ragging on web developers.
No, there's decent work to be done as a web developer. And
But no web developer is going to build Uber in WordPress. But they would try if you took the job to them.
If you tried really hard, you could, but you ultimately run into engineering problems,
Massive,
like
huge
scalability issues,
Security
deployment issues, security issues, all of which is hard to solve with a non-bespoke product platform like WordPress.
Another red flag that I would advise people to watch out for is when you may be the red flag here, you're just hiring one person, a freelancer dev, to build out your new business idea. A freelance dev may seem like a cheap, cost-effective solution, and sometimes it works, but I think most of the time that dev just suddenly disappears. They get a job, they're sick of your shit, they go somewhere else.
Yep.
And then you are left high and dry, and you may not even own the IP, and you may not even have access to the source code, and there's literally zero you can do. So
It happens more often than you think as well.
that's right.
Yeah.
It's a massive risk, and honestly, that's why you go with a software development company. Because if one of our devs decided to leave, we have several more to fill his shoes. So that's a big risk.
So what are some green flags then? What do you look for? What's a good sign of a thriving software engineering company that can deliver?
I mean, successful projects.
So case studies, portfolios.
You should be able to meet the devs who are doing the work, and even if they're offshoring, you should be able to at least meet them on Zoom, at least talk to them once. I mean, we try to keep clients away from the devs as much as possible because software devs traditionally don't like talking to
But the
people.
devs do exist.
Yes,
physically.
you can see them.
Like
they're
upstairs somewhere.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's what's important.
I don't know what office would look like that, but I think another green flag is that they have the ability to take on multiple technologies. They're not locked into one way of doing things.
Okay.
That's probably harder to figure out, and you probably need someone technical helping you select the software dev. But I would recommend that anyway. Generally, if you're going to hire someone to build a big project, you should have someone with at least a little bit of technical knowledge helping you out. And in fact, we perform this function where people can't afford us because, in all honesty, we're not cheap. We're not the cheapest devs in town because of the quality we provide, and someone can't afford us. But what we do is we help them select someone else. Perform a kind of test function on them to make sure that the devs they go with, whether offshore or freelance or whatever, at least know what the hell they're doing.
Well, that's a green flag, right? It's the care of the success of the products.
But make sure you at least have someone in your core who can see the green flags and the red flags.
So the sub-stories that we run into a lot, the most common problem is usually the non-technical startup or product founder is being talked around by someone who's very technical.
Lied to.
Or
Flim-flammed.
Yeah,
buzzworded.
Yeah, so it's very common in the offshoring space as well. I think you'd find
it's pretty common
even here
locally too.
Yeah, because as very technically proficient programming-minded people, it's easy to talk rings around people, right? And that kind of power is, can be used for bad, for evil.
And they also are usually the ones that are maintaining all the infrastructure.
Yeah, so that's the other problem is taking services hostage, right? So
we've seen that many times where the dev, and actually in our experience, it's less likely with offshore. In our experience, it's actually more likely with CTOs of startups.
That's right, because they own the keys to the kingdom. And in this case, the keys is often your AWS or infrastructure credentials, which only they have. And then the non-technical founder just trusted them with this kind of access.
Well, I think it's less trust and more thankful that someone was taking care of it, which, fair enough. But then this technical co-founder will say, I want more equity, or I actually want to earn a wage now, or I just don't like you and I'm taking my work elsewhere. We've seen that. We've seen a dev suddenly just vanish with the source code and the,
So-
and the platform and go find another person to start a new company with?
This is related to the bus factor, which is if the top developer was hit by a bus tomorrow, what happens to the product?
Yeah,
Right?
that's right.
And if you cannot take custody of the product in the absence of your developer, then that's something that needs to be handled. Otherwise, not even from a malicious CTO kind of stance, but even just out of just risk management.
Yeah.
Anything can happen. Maybe even if they didn't want to, perhaps they were poached by another job, or they were actually hit by a bus.
Especially with offshoring in India, seeing whole companies just vanish because of COVID.
Yeah.
And on that with offshoring, that's the other thing we've seen, other sub story we've seen is that someone gets some work done, usually in Southeast Asia, and then suddenly that company that's doing it for them just vanishes. That offshore company just goes dark. And there's several reasons for that. Sometimes it's COVID in India. Sometimes they were the cheapest kids on the block, even in offshoring world, and then they just
folded. They just folded sometimes.
They folded, or they got better and they've got better paying clients, and now you're their worst paying client, and so they just ignore you. What are you going to do? You're going to jump on a plane and confront them? You're done. Your project's done.
So there's two pieces here. You must have custody of your source code, and you must have custody of your infrastructure.
Yeah.
With that, you can move to another provider.
And in all honesty, if you don't understand those terms, you need some help. So come and talk to us. It's really good. Quality means it's really good.
So good and strong and fast.
Yeah. So I guess quality there's several levels. You got user experience is where I would start. So when users actually use it, it's a good experience. They enjoy using it, or they're maybe even addicted to using it. It doesn't get in their way. It makes their life better. Like, that's quality software. Then you've got the engineering side, which is resilience and scalability. A well-written piece of software could handle 10 users, or it could handle 10,000 users all at the same time. Crappy software, as we've seen in this business, there's a lot of software that's built that can't handle any kind of scale, and you never find out until way later when your product actually gets successful. I think Twitter is a good example of that.
I think I started on the quick-to-build frameworks like Ruby on Rails. But as they grew, they employed the right people that actually made it scalable.
Yeah, but there was definitely some teething pain where, remember the fail whale? I don't think you see the fail whale anymore, but fail whale used to be because their platform couldn't scale with their demand. So quality software, number one, has great user experience. Users like using it. 2, it can handle quite a lot of load and scale with the demand. And 3, it doesn't break very often or at all. That's quality in software.
Yeah. As long as it needs to be, right?
As long as it needs to be. I would say MVPs are usually 6 months if built by competent and fast developers. But then I would say a year and a half.
For a quality post MVP product?
Yeah, like first version. Yeah. After you find out all of the things it needs to really cater to your market, year and a half. But you can get to market in 6 months on average.
Debug another buzzword, MVP.
So MVP means minimum viable product. For our context, minimum viable product is you can actually go to market. It's enough of a product that your users will want to use it, and you can actually start
collecting feedback too, right? So there's a point where it's actually been deployed, and you can actually get feedback from your users, after which you can then continue the development of the MVP into a full product.
Yeah, but it's the minimum amount you need. And I don't think there's been a single project where we haven't started with MVP in mind, because otherwise you'll spend money building stuff you maybe don't need.
Well, it's the true market test, because you've got users using it, possibly paying for it too.
And you're boiling down all the things you want into something nice and manageable and actually achievable. Get some money.
Well, actually, this is an interesting one, because everyone's got great ideas, and sometimes you think that's enough to create a business.
Yeah.
Well, it's not. You need someone who can execute, right?
Non-pithy answer to this question is learn how to code.
I was about to say
and
the
build
same.
it yourself.
I was about to say the same thing. Coding is very accessible.
Yeah,
and
there's zero barriers to entry. You just need a computer and the internet.
and iron resolve, because it does take some time.
Yeah,
But there are people out there that have had the resolve to actually commit, learn, and actually deploy products.
and people in their 40s. I think we heard a story very recently of a guy in his 40s. I think he was a FIFO worker. He got a great idea to solve a problem that he's experiencing as, I can't remember exactly what he was doing, but he came up with a perfect solution, and he obviously didn't want to spend money on a company like Ninja Software. So he spent like a year and a half or whatever it was learning how to program.
I mean, the thing is, today it's a lot easier to learn program than 10 years ago.
My only advice is you've got lots of tutorials and you've got all the Code Academy stuff, and they're good to get you started like first few weeks. After that, just start actually trying to build your project. Try to build your idea. You'll fail and it'll be complete horseshit. But eventually you'll throw it out and you'll start again. And you'll throw that out and you'll start again, and you'll get somewhere good. And you'll have spent no money.
Just time.
Just time.
And at least you have new skills.
Yeah. So if you've got no money and no way to get money, learn to code. If it's really that great an idea and you feel that passionately about it, learn to code.
Not to mention, if you actually got to the point where you learnt enough, by the time you actually hire someone, you'd actually understand what's going on.
That's right. Yeah.
So less chance of being tricked later.
And you can get the project started, you can get your idea rolling, and then you can get something that you would be able to then take to investors, angel investors, and actually get some funding for it. And by that point, you know enough to sniff out the bullshit artists. So yeah, learn to code. We've done that. We still do it.
It's a common request because it reduces the risk for the client to do a joint venture, right?
Reduces their costs.
Yeah.
Increases our risk. So we have to believe in the idea. I mean, it has to be a cool idea. We have to want to be involved because we have enough work on, and we have our own cool ideas. I mean, this is the problem, right? People come to us and they say, "I've got this great idea. I can't afford your normal rates. Would you be interested in taking some equity?" And I'm like, well, tell us the idea. And then the idea is it's okay. We don't love it because it's not our idea. And we have our own ideas that we love. We are entrepreneurial. We're building out our own ideas too. We are just as in this game as our clients are.
I think this is a problem that you run into with most programmers, right? Every programmer is full of amazing ideas that they want to build.
Yeah.
Not just Ninja Software as a company, but most freelancers as well. So if you went up to a programmer and you offered some equity, if they accept, then it's actually cause to be slightly suspicious, unless you actually convince them that your idea is amazing and it's worth investing in.
And on the same token, if there's any software developers or aspiring software developers watching this, don't take equity unless you're also super impressed with the person who's offering it. And they need to have proven ability to sell, proven ability in maybe starting and running businesses. They need to be just as impressive as the idea, because good ideas are a dime a dozen.
Not to mention the promise of profit share as well is a very common one.
Honestly, with a brand new idea, fuck profit share.
Yeah.
way too soon to it. Like, they don't even know what they could give you and still break even. So just take profit share off the table. Don't offer profit share. Don't take profit share. Pure equity. If you're really into the idea, and if all it is an idea and a guy coming to you, it's 50-50. For us, we don't do anything for free, never. It's something we would never bend on. So it's basically for reduced cost. So we'll maybe take a 10% equity stake for a reduction in our actual general fees. But again, we have to believe in the idea. This is not something that's just available to anyone.
Yeah.
I have been told we charge like a wounded bull. But that's because we actually do have There's a lot of service and value that's provided in our cost. One, most software development houses will, they'll charge you for one software developer's time, right? But that's not reality. We have a software developer, and for every software developer, there's a software tester, there's a project manager, and there's a deployments guy, and a DevOps guy. Like there's a whole lot of functions going on at once that you wouldn't get at a standard software development house. A standard software development house, you get one dev doing your work. Really no different from a freelancer, except hopefully if he gets hit by a bus, they have another one to put in his place. We have a team working on every project we work on, essentially to ensure quality and to ensure that deployments are made smoothly and quickly. So yes, they probably are expensive.
It's for a reason.
Yeah.
Right. And it's just the cost of developing an app is more than just programming.
Yeah.
It's management. It's handling schedules. It's developing design, building designs.
That's right. In fact, I neglected to mention it's graphic designer. There's a UX designer.
Yeah, like you mentioned infrastructure as well. So that's actually time for a DevOps guy to do it all. And it's all wrapped into this one quote. There's more to it than people understand, which is why we were happy to explain.
People don't understand that the software developer might be hard at work, smashing out the actual project according to the designs that the graphic designer did, and then he'll need clarification. Because even with a very thorough graphic design, there's always elements that maybe escape that initial design. So you have to go back to the graphic designer. The graphic designer has to do a bit more work. Then the UX designer has to look at that and ensure that we're still guaranteeing high level of user experience. Then you have the project manager that has to create the job card and sign it and make sure it gets delivered on time. Like it's a rolling thing, a team. It's most places it's a single dude.
And also related to the previous question, actually, programming is actually creative. It's actually quite a creative approach.
We're artists.
Yeah, artists. You craft code, you cut it into shape, right? But because of that, you don't actually know how long it takes to do until you get enough experience to estimate.
That's right.
So ultimately, the quote we provide is built from all that experience of estimation. And the runaway cost that we mentioned earlier needs to be shielded from the client, because the client just does not understand that a simple feature might take 6 months instead of 2 weeks.
And I'm pulling this stat out of my ass, but my memory is that I think 90% of software projects fail, and a lot of that is because it wasn't budgeted properly. And halfway through, the person providing that budget can't provide any more. And boom, software project dead. So even if it was a great idea, even if it was really good work being done, it's gone. How many software projects won't even see the light of day because of running out of budget? So yes, we are expensive, but there's a reason, and we always deliver, always. And ultimately, I think the other question was, can you be cheaper? Can you accept less? Are there features you don't need? Is there functionality you don't need? Is there, do you need it to look amazing? Do you need it to, cut it down to that. Do you need everything you've asked for? If not, then yeah, we can make it cheaper. But there's no compromise, there's no discount. I mean, obviously, with our software developers, they need to be able to code.
I mean, programming is useful for a programmer.
Software developer. Honestly, curiosity, resilience,
Drive.
Yeah, we don't care about academics. We don't care about prior experience so much, except for prior experience in their own life. So we want to see their own personal projects, hobby projects. We want to see that not only can they code, they love it. In their free time they're doing it. They're solving their own problems. They understand that software development is
Craft.
It's not so much a job, it's a craft, and it's a way to actually make your life better. I mean, Most people learn to code because they had a problem that could be solved with code. Even accountants learn to code in Excel so that they can make their job as an accountant easier. And that kind of drive and curiosity and willingness to spend hours and hours and hours hunched over a computer for their own passion hobby projects. That's what we want to see.
Yeah, so back to the topic of accessibility as well, is that a programmer can show their work online.
Yeah.
There's no need for a degree. There's no need for a CV even, because your work speaks for itself.
That's not to say like a computer science degree we disregard it. I mean, it's nice that you know the fundamentals and you picked up some actual methodology behind.
But it's no substitute for really caring about what you do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so we want to see GitHub projects or GitHub repos. We want to see, I really love seeing people contribute to open source projects. I like people who create their own wacky personal websites. So we look for demonstrated ability. This is Tech Society fielding questions we've received as the founders of Ninja Software.